What's going on, guys? Welcome to the circus. And if you guys will remember from my last episode, I was really bothered by all those unmaskings on the 14th, 15th, and 16th. I was unable to find commonalities, so I did a whole graphic and looked at it. I finally figured out, at least one day, on the 14th, all of those unmaskings, with the exception of Brennan and Samantha Powers, they were all done by the Department of Treasury. And so, I used this graphic in my last video. It's gonna need some names and faces added to it. So let's go through those names and faces now. Jack Lew is number one. At the time, he was the Secretary of Treasury. He's an Obama appointee. He was sent by Obama to Treasury in February of 2013 to cover up for the IRS scandal. He was also formerly Obama's advisor. Obama likes to take his former advisors and put them in key positions to block. Next name that stood out, unmasking, Nathan Sheets, Undersecretary of the Treasury for International Affairs at the time. And then you start getting into these positions I didn't know were Treasury. This is Danny McGlynn, and he was the Acting Assistant Secretary for Intelligence and Analysis, which is under Treasury. Adam Zubin, Acting Undersecretary of Treasury at the time. Sarah Raskin, she was the Deputy Secretary at the time. And she also, we'll take a look here, was appointed to the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System by President Obama. And in case you recognize that last name, that's because her husband is that Democrat House member from Maryland that was arguing for Trump's removal during the impeachment. I mean, what a weasel-looking, what a grimy dude. Next on my list was the Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intel and Analysis, Michael Neufeld. And I couldn't find anything on this guy, but I tracked him down in the Federal Register of the Senior Executive Service PRBs, or Performance Review Boards. As early as October 22nd, 2019, Michael Neufeld was still working in the federal government. That's why it's hard to find anything on him. This guy is Senior Executive Service. He was part of the unmasking, and he's currently working in the United States federal government. Somebody besides a YouTuber needs to look into that shit. Either way, I found the commonality in all these unmaskers on the 14th. They were all Treasury. And then I went and did some searching. And talk about awesome. May 18, 2020, I find the Ohio Star is reporting on a Treasury Department whistleblower. And so today we're going to talk about the connection between the Treasury and the FBI abuse of the FISA applications, because it's all tied together. It's all one long running grift, and I'll show you the connections. So let's get into it. We'll start with this article. Thank God for the Ohio Star. Never thought I would say those words, but leading the way in news and education, they might be. So we went through, in my previous section, the commonality I found on all of the unmasking requests on the 14th of December. All part of Treasury. Now, that got my screws turning, because I was thinking about the IRS scandal. For people who don't know, the Obama administration, early 2010s, I think, accused of targeting conservative 501c3s. They even went so far as they would deny their 501c3 status. Then they were also releasing their donor transcripts and then auditing donors to the conservative 501c3s. So they were doing some really horrible things through the IRS back then. And then I see this exclusive. The Treasury Department spied on Flynn, Manafort, and the Trump family, says whistleblower. And this is the Ohio Star covering a whistleblower that has been in the background for a couple of years now, but has actually gotten the paperwork filed correctly and has moved through the system to the point where we should be hearing about them now. Not like in the fake whistleblower scenario where all their information was put out by Congress before we even knew what was going on. So let's read about this Department of Treasury whistleblower. President Barack Obama's Treasury Department regularly surveilled retired Army Lieutenant General Michael T. Flynn's financial records and transactions beginning in December 2015 and well into 2017, before, during, and after when he served at the White House as President Trump's National Security Director. A former senior Treasury Department official and veteran of the intelligence community told the Star newspapers. I started seeing things that were not correct, so I did my own little investigation because I wanted to make sure what I was seeing was correct, she said. You never want to draw attention to something if there is not anything there. The whistleblower said she only saw metadata. That is, names and dates when the general's financial records were accessed. I never saw what they saw. By March 2016, the whistleblower said she and a colleague who was detailed to Treasury from the intelligence community became convinced that the surveillance of Flynn was not tied to legitimate criminal or national security concerns, but it was straight up political surveillance among other illegal activity occurring at Treasury. When I showed it to her, she said, "Oh shit," and I knew right then and there that I was right. This was some shady stuff, the whistleblower said. It wasn't just him. They were targeting other U.S. citizens as well. Another thing they would do is take targeted names from certain database. I cannot name, but you can guess. She's referring to the NSA database. And they were going over to an unclassified database, and they were running those names in the unclassified database. This ruse was to get around using classified resources to surveil Americans, she said. Once the Treasury personnel had enough information about someone they were targeting from the black box, they would go into the white box for faster and more informed searches. It was routine for these searches that had no criminal or national security predicate, merely a political predicate. In March of 2017, she filed a formal whistleblower complaint with Acting Treasury Inspector General Richard K. Delmar, who continues in that office today, she said. Beyond Delmar acknowledging the receipt of the complaint, the Inspector General never followed up on the matter. This formal complaint was a follow-up to an August 2016 notification to Delmar that did not meet the full requirements of formal complaint, but it provided Delmar with the details of Treasury's surveillance of Flynn. The whistleblower filed a subsequent complaint with the Office of Special Counsel, May 2017, which is the permanent office established to work with whistleblowers and not related to Special Counsel Robert Mueller. So let's be clear here what we're talking about here. So this whistleblower filed a whistleblowing complaint in March of 2017 to the Acting Treasury Inspector General Richard K. Delmar, and he didn't do anything with it. This is something that we've seen over and over and over again. It just got sat on, and this is what they've been doing. This is part of their active measures against being discovered. She filed with the Office of Special Counsel a year later after not getting any follow-up to what her complaint was. This surveillance program was run out of Treasury's Office of Intelligence Analysis. Okay, so the Treasury Department has an Office of Intelligence Analysis, or OIA. That is how we ended up with all those names of Treasury unmasking Flynn on the 14th, which was then under the leadership of S. Leslie Ireland. Ireland came to ONI in 2010 after a long tenure at the CIA and a one-year stint as Obama's daily in-person intelligence briefer. Well, isn't that funny? Because we know that Jack Lew was also Obama's daily in-person intelligence briefer. Accessing this information without approved and signed Attorney General guidelines would violate U.S. persons' constitutional rights and civil liberties. IC agencies have to adhere to Executive Order 12333, or as it's known in the community, Just because OIA does not have signed guidelines does not give them the power or right to operate as they want. If you want information on a U.S. person, then work with the FBI on a Title III. If it is a U.S. person involved with a foreign entity, then follow the correct process for FISA. But without AG guidelines, you cannot even get started, she said. Title III refers to the FBI authority to electronically surveil Americans. This article is what was put before me whenever I went out in search of the connection between all of the unmaskings on the 14th. This is the page right here that blew my mind, obviously. All right. Because the intercepts from Flynn's December 29, 2016 phone call with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak were captured by an entity other than Treasury. All right, so let's make that clear. It was not the FBI's surveillance, and now it was not the Treasury's surveillance. We can mark both of those off the list. All right, anyways. Because the intercepts from Flynn's December 29, 2016 phone call with the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak were captured by an entity other than Treasury, Patrick Conlon, the OIA director who succeeded Ireland, was on the list of 37 Obama administration officials who either requested that Flynn's name be unmasked or were shown the unmasked surveillance product. Conlon accessed the Flynn file December 14th, 2016. There must have been some kind of meeting that day. These are all of the other Treasury Department officials looking at Flynn that day. Secretary Jacob Lew, Acting Assistant Secretary for Intelligence and Analysis Danny McGlynn, Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intelligence and Analysis Michael Neufeld, Deputy Secretary Sarah Raskin, Undersecretary Nathan Sheets, and Acting Undersecretary Adam Suzubin. Okay, so thank you, Ohio Star, for some really groundbreaking reporting. There's some things in there that really started my gears turning about the 14th and all those unmaskings. And Treasury. That's when I started thinking about the IRS scandal. And I known at the time of the IRS scandal that Obama had appointed Jack Lew as the head of Treasury to kind of cover that whole thing up. Regardless, I started searching about this whistleblower because if you think about it, the Ohio Star Registry even mentions that she was detailed to Treasury from intelligence. And what you might, if you're not careful, what you might think there is that there was another intelligence agency that thought that there was some skeevy stuff going down in Treasury, and so they set up for these two intelligence officers, this woman and her immediate supervisor that filed the whistleblower complaints, to go work at Treasury and snoop around. You know, this kind of stuff is what was done to the Trump administration. It could also be done to the Black Hats. At the time that this whistleblower was inserted into Treasury, there was a well-established fact pattern around the IRS's abuse of conservative 501c3s. Regardless, by searching with the whistleblower attached to the query, I came to a Conservative Treehouse article. And some people are going to knock Conservative Treehouse for being biased. It can be. But the great thing about the Conservative Treehouse is it always gives you its source documents when it makes a claim. And what they were saying, the title was Secondary Confirmation. Treasury whistleblower complaint aligns directly with President Obama's political surveillance activity. And what Sundance is saying here in his article is that the Treasury Department whistleblower's story, which I just read to you from the Ohio Star, lines up directly with what the Conservative Treehouse's research has been saying. So I'm going to skip the beginning of this article where he outlines what the Treasury whistleblower said, because I just read that to you. And we'll start here. What is described in that article is exactly what our research discovered. As we overlaid numerous declassified reports from the NSA FISA court and testimony to Congress around the previous use of the IRS to target political opposition. The FISA court identified and quantified tens of thousands of search queries of the NSA/FBI database using the FISA 702.16 and 17 system. The database was repeatedly used by persons with contractor access who unlawfully searched and extracted the raw results without redacting the information and shared it with an unknown number of entities. There is little doubt that the FISA 702.16.17 database system was used by Obama-era officials from 2012 through April 2016 as a way to spy on their political opposition. Quite simply, there is no other intellectually honest explanation for the scale and volume of database abuse that was taking place. And keep in mind, these searches were all ruled to be unlawful. Searches for repeated persons over a period of time that were not authorized. This whistleblower complaint simply makes sense. We know that Jack Lew was moved from President Obama's White House to the position of Treasury Secretary specifically because the IRS targeting became public. As Treasury Secretary, Mr. Lew was in position to keep damaging information from surfacing. Political Spying 1.0, which is a beautiful name for this, was actually the weaponization of the IRS. This is where the term, quote, secret research project, close quote, originated as a description from Obama team. It involved the U.S. Department of Justice under Eric Holder and the FBI under Herr Mueller. It never made sense why Eric Holder requested over 1 million tax records via CD-ROM until overlaying the timeline of the FISA abuse. The IRS sent the FBI 21 disks constituting a 1.1 million page database of information from 501c4 tax-exempt organizations to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The transaction occurred in October of 2010. Why disks? Well, because it was 2010. Why send a stack of disks to the DOJ and FBI when there's a pre-existing financial crimes unit within the IRS? All of the evidence within this sketchy operation came directly to the surface in early spring 2012. The IRS scandal was never really about the IRS. It was always about the DOJ asking the IRS for the database of information. That is why it was transparently a conflict when the same DOJ was tasked with investigating the DOJ-IRS scandal. Additionally, Obama sent his chief of staff, Jack Lew. This is a pattern with Obama, is sending his current chief of staff or his current briefer into these positions to become Treasury Secretary, effectively placing an ally to oversee/cover up any issues. As Treasury Secretary, Lew did just that. The timeline reflects a few months after realizing the, quote, secret research project was now worthless, June of 2012. They focused more deliberately on a smaller network within the intelligence apparatus and began weaponizing the FBI NSA database. So understand what they're saying here. They're saying because of the IRS scandal, because that got blown up and they could no longer use that to spy on their political enemies, they switched methods right around June of 2012. And that's right when Herr Mueller was becoming the head of the FBI. Sometime around summer of 2012, the Obama administration shifted from direct searches of the Treasury IRS files to using contractor access to the NSA database as a way to conduct political surveillance and export search results without minimization. The process of exploiting the NSA database continued for years until March of 2016, when a severe uptick in activity, coinciding with the candidate Donald Trump becoming the presumptive GOP nominee, flagged the NSA database auditor. Early in 2016, NSA Director Admiral Mike Rogers was alerted of a significant uptick in FISA 702.17 about queries using the FBI NSA database that holds all metadata records on every form of electronic communication. All right, we're going to go back through this as if nobody's ever seen any of my videos, because we know that I've talked extensively about Admiral Mike Rogers, the hero, and there's no reason for me to skip this. I think it's important that we actually go through it again because it's kind of complex. Also, how terrifying is the last of that paragraph? Every form of electronic communication. Yay. The NSA compliance officer alerted Admiral Mike Rogers, who then initiated a full compliance audit on or around March 9th, 2016. For the period of November 1st, 2015 through May 1st, 2016. While the audit was ongoing, due to the severity of the results that were identified, Admiral Mike Rogers stopped anyone from using the 702.17 about query option and went to the extraordinary step of blocking all FBI contractor access to the database on April 18, 2016. It just makes sense. The exported contractor results from the database access would then transfer to non-classified Treasury searches on other networks for more details. That process is exactly what the Treasury Whistleblower is outlining. After I read that article, I just sat there for a little bit and I was just thinking. And, well, first of all, the first thought that came to my mind that I want to share with you guys. And I was thinking about how scandal-ridden the Obama administration is. I was thinking about how it's another example of exact inversion. You see it all the time, and I think that it's as above, so below, and all their Masonic, satanic shit. Yeah, but I also think that they do it because it makes it the hardest to believe. If you look at a truth and it is telling you that what you've believed all your life is the exact opposite, it causes people to really react violently against that new truth, because they have built, it usually addresses some concrete foundational belief. And I think that's why they directly invert more than all their symbolism. The exact opposite is the hardest thing for somebody to accept. When they've been believing what they call their truth for their entire life and they're presented with, you were exactly incorrect. That's the hardest thing to get over. I mean, if you were halfway right, I mean, at least you knew what was going on. You were in the ballpark, right? Anyways, I'm rambling. So I'm thinking in the larger context of all of this. So now we understand the Obama administration was using Treasury to look at aspects of people's lives that they had pulled, using information that they had pulled off of other databases. When the Treasury scam got blown up, they had to move all into using the about queries and the NSA database. And then when that got blown up, they had to do the FISA surveillance. And then when that got blown, you understand, see how we're doing this? And so it's just like, while we were thinking that perhaps this was a well-oiled antithesis to the Trump administration, it really seems like a bunch of people who were just doing whatever they wanted whenever they wanted and never expected somebody to come in that would be against the bureaucracy and that would actually out them for these types of political abuses. It's the same mentality like that Adam Schiff had when he couldn't see the move of Trump releasing the transcript. He just couldn't see that because while every president could release any transcript they wanted, there was such political history behind presidents maintaining that he literally couldn't see that play. To the point where he went on TV and started quoting this transcript that he knew had been made. He goes out and he starts misquoting it in the halls of Congress. He knows it's been made. And he does it with that surefire belief that Trump will never release that transcript because that's not what presidents do. It's that mentality that got them caught. They never thought somebody who was actually against the bureaucracy would ever be in charge of it. And that has happened. And all these people, Trump's part of it, blah, blah, blah. The parentheses are everywhere. And, it's just, yeah, you're right. Listen, if I look at it in an honest eye, I see Trump, Flynn, Kushner, Rogers. That could be just another elite faction. When we sit back and allow other people to accomplish these things for us, we are never going to be doing anything other than exchanging one group of controllers for another. Can it be a good exchange? Sometimes, yes. Can it be a net benefit? Yes. Can it be a bad exchange? Yes. And that's how it goes. Until you take personal responsibility, you're only going to be exchanging your rulers. So we keep that in mind. We know that. And we don't have these unnecessarily insane expectations of Donald Trump. And it's so funny. He's such a victim to these expectations. Because like the people on the opposite end of the spectrum, they're expecting him to be the most evil person on the planet Earth. And then the people that really support him think he's the greatest and they can do no wrong. And once again, the people in the middle are left like, yo. Anyways, I'm really getting sidetracked on this video. So I'm thinking about the inversion. I'm thinking about Obama's administration was scandal-ridden. And in that context, I wanted to see if I could find something that outlined all of it. And I didn't have to go far. I really like this Sundance guy, whoever he is, she, whatever. Why is the former President Obama calling forth all his defensive resources now? Why did former National Security Advisor Susan Rice write her CYA letter? Why have Republicans in Congress not been willing to investigate the true origins of political surveillance? What is the reason for so much anger, desperation, and opposition from a variety of interests? With the release of recent transcripts and the declassification of material from within the IG report, the Carter-Page FISA, and Flynn documents showing FBI activity, there is a common misconception about why the intelligence apparatus began investigating the Trump campaign in the first place. Why was Donald Trump considered a threat? In this outline, we hope to provide some fully cited deep source material that will explain the origin and specifically why those inside the intelligence community began targeting Trump and using confidential human sources against campaign officials. During the time frame of December 2015 through April 2016, the NSA database was being exploited by contractors within the intelligence community doing unauthorized searches. On March 9th, 2016, oversight personnel doing a review of the FBI system access were alerted to thousands of unauthorized search queries of specific U.S. persons within the NSA database. On April 18, 2016, following the preliminary audit results, Director Rogers shut down all FBI contractor access to the database after he learned FISA 702 about 17 and 2/from 16 search queries were being done without authorization. Thus begins the first discovery of a much bigger background story. When you compile the timeline with the people involved and the specific wording of the resulting review, which was then delivered to the FISA court, and overlay the activity that was taking place in the GOP primary, what we discover is a process where the metadata collected by the NSA was being searched for political opposition research and surveillance. Additionally, tens of thousands of searches were identified by the FISA court as likely extending much further than the compliance review period. Quote, while the government reports it is unable to provide a reliable estimate of the non-compliant queries since 2012, there is no apparent reason to believe the November 2015 to April 2016 period coincided with an unusually high error rate. In short, during the Obama administration, the NSA database was continually used to conduct surveillance. This is the critical point that leads to understanding the origin of Spygate as it unfolded in the spring and summer of 2016. And, what we can add to this now is that before the NSA database, the Obama administration was using the IRS database. You see what I'm saying? It was the discovery of the database exploitation and the removal of access as a surveillance tool that created their initial problem. Here's how we can tell. On Super Tuesday, March 2, Donald Trump won 7 states. It was clear then that Trump was the GOP frontrunner with momentum to become the presumptive nominee. March 5th, Trump won Kentucky and Louisiana. And on March 8th, Trump won Michigan, Mississippi, and Hawaii. The next day, March 9th, NSA security alerts warned internal oversight personnel that something sketchy was going on. This timing is not coincidental, as FISA judge Rosemary Collyer later wrote in her report, many of these non-compliant queries involve the use of the same identifiers over different ranges. Put another way, attributes belonging to a specific individual were being targeted and queried unlawfully. Given what was later discovered, it seems obvious the primary search target over multiple date ranges was Donald Trump. And I also think Ted Cruz, but there were tens of thousands of unauthorized search queries, and as Judge Collyer stated in her report, there is no reason to believe 85% non-compliant rate was any different from the abuse of the NSA database going back to 2012. That is devastating. As you will see below, the NSA database was how political surveillance was being conducted during Obama's second term in office. However, when the system was flagged and when NSA Director Mike Rogers shut down contractor access to the system users needed to develop another way to get access. Mike Rogers shuts down access on April 18th, 2016. On April 19th, 2016, Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson's wife, Mary Jacoby, visits the White House. Immediately thereafter, the DNC and Clinton campaign contract Fusion GPS, who then hire Christopher Steele, and the beginning of the Dossier starts. Knowing it was federal contractors outside government access to the system doing the unauthorized searches, the question becomes, who were the contractors? The possibilities are quite vast. Essentially, anyone the FBI or intelligence apparatus was using could have participated, and this is true. CrowdStrike was a known FBI contractor. They were also contracted by the DNC. Sean Henry was the former head of the FBI office in D.C. and is now the president of CrowdStrike Services. So let's think about that as a side note. So the FBI and CrowdStrike were supposedly working together to investigate the Hillary Clinton email scandal. And now you're telling me that the former head of the DC field office is the president of CrowdStrike? Unbelievable. I mean, it's... This article makes a connection to Cheryl Atkinson's computer intrusions. It's all part of the same network, they say. Atkinson even names Sean Henry as a defendant in her lawsuit, who is the president of CrowdStrike and the former head of the DC field office of the FBI. It seems likely if the NSA flags were never triggered, then the contracting system users would have continued exploiting the NSA database for political opposition research, which would then be funneled to the Clinton team. However, once the unauthorized flags were triggered, the system users, including those inside the official intelligence apparatus, needed to find another backdoor to continue. Again, it's all about timing. Immediately after the NSA flags were raised, March 9th, the same intelligence agencies began using confidential human sources to run into the Trump campaign. By activating intelligence assets like Joseph Mifsud and Stefan Halper, the IC and the system users had now created an authorized way to continue the same political surveillance operations. When Donald Trump hired Paul Manafort on March 28, 2016, it was a perfect scenario for those doing the surveillance. Manafort was a known entity to the FBI and was previously under investigation. Paul Manafort's entree into the Trump orbit was perfect for Glenn Simpson to sell his prior research on Manafort as a Trump-Russia collusion script 2 weeks later. I'm going to make an entire video on that one day. But suffice it to say, if you go on Google and you Google Glenn Simpson original Russia collusion article, you'll find that he wrote a story and published it as an op-ed 2 years before the Trump-Russia collusion narrative. And it's the exact same narrative with some extra spice thrown in this time. The shift from unauthorized exploitation of the NSA database to legally authorized exploitation of the NSA database was now in place. This was how they continued the political surveillance. This is the confluence of events that originated Spygate, or what officially blossomed into the FBI investigation known as Crossfire Hurricane on July 31. If the NSA flags were never raised, and if Director Rogers had never initiated the compliance audit, and if the political contractors were never blocked from access to the database, they would never have needed to create a legal backdoor, a justification to retain the surveillance. The political operatives, contractors, would have just continued the targeted metadata exploitation. Once they created the surveillance door, Fusion GPS was then needed to get the FBI known commodity of Chris Steele activated and into the pipeline. Into that pipeline, all system users pushed opposition research. However, one mistake from the NSA database extraction during an about query shows up as a New Yorker named Michael Cohen in Prague. That misinterpreted data from a FISA 702 about query is then piped to Chris Steele and turns up inside of the dossier. It was the wrong Michael Cohen. It wasn't Trump's lawyer. It was an art dealer from New York City with the same name, the same identifier. So when we watched Michael Cohen testifying, quote, against Trump, and he said that he had never been to Prague, but in the Steele dossier, it specifically says that Michael Cohen was in Prague on these specific dates. And Michael Cohen is in Prague on those specific dates. It's just the wrong Michael Cohen. People in our government understood immediately what all that meant. And we were still behind because we didn't quite understand how the about queries were being used. Well, here's one obvious way. People searched the database and then piped the information to Christopher Steele so that he could use it to write the Steele dossier. We can prove that with the wrong Michael Cohen. And I mean, dang, talk about bad luck for the bad guys. How many Michael Cohens are there that are in New York City that are going to be in Prague? So how did it work? Start by reviewing the established record from the 99-page FISC opinion rendered by presiding judge Rosemary Collyer on April 26, 2017. Review the details within the FISC opinion. I would strongly urge everyone to read the FISC report, full PDF below, because Judge Collyer outlines how the DOJ, which includes the FBI, had an institutional lack of candor in responses to the FISA court. In essence, the Obama administration was continually lying to the FISA court about their activity and the rate of Fourth Amendment violations for illegal searches and seizures of U.S. persons' private information for multiple years. Unfortunately, due to intelligence terminology, Judge Collyer's brief and ruling is not an easy read for anyone unfamiliar with the FISA processes. That complexity also helps the media avoid discussing it, and as a result, most Americans have no idea the scale and scope of the Obama-era surveillance issues, so we'll try to break down the language. For the sake of brevity and common understanding, CTH will highlight the most pertinent segments showing how systematic and troublesome the unlawful electronic surveillance was. Earlier in 2016, NSA Director Admiral Mike Rogers was alerted of the significant uptick in FISA 702.17 about queries using the FBI NSA database that holds all metadata records on every form of electronic communication. The NSA compliance officer alerted Admiral Mike Rogers, who then initiated a full compliance audit on or around March 9th for the period of November 1st, 15 through May 1st, 2016. The key takeaway from these first paragraphs is how the search query results were exported from the NSA database to users who were not authorized to see the material. The FBI contractors were conducting searches and then removing or exporting the results. Later on, the FBI said all of the exported material was deleted. Searching the highly classified NSA database is essentially a function of filling out search boxes to identify the user-initiated search parameter and get a return of the search result. FISA 702.16 is a search of the system returning a U.S. person, 702, and the 16 is a checkbox to initiate a search based on to and from. Example, if you put a date and a phone number and you check 16 as the search parameter, the user will get the returns on everything to and from that identified phone number for the specific date. Calls, texts, contacts, etc., including results for the inbound and outbound contacts. FISA 702.17, which I think is funny because Q is 17, and nobody's ever put this reasoning up as to why Q calls himself Q, but it could most certainly be. Let me read to you what FISA 702.17 is a search of the system returning a U.S. person 702, and the 17 is a checkbox to initiate a search based on everything about the search qualifier. Example, if you put a date and a phone number and check 17 as the search parameter, the user will get the returns of everything about that phone. Calls, texts, contacts, geolocation or GPS results, account information, user service provider, etc. As a result, 702.17 can actually be used to locate where the phone and user was located on a specific date or sequentially over a specific period of time, which is simply a matter of changing the date parameters. And that's just from a phone number. Search an IP address about and read all the data into that server, put in an email address and gain everything about that account, or use the electronic address of a GPS-enabled vehicle, and you can withdraw more electronic data and monitor in real time. Search a credit card number and get everything about the account, including what was purchased, where, when, etc. Search a bank account number, get everything about transactions and electronic records, etc. Just about anything and everything can be electronically searched. Everything has an electronic identifier. The search parameter is only limited by the originating field filled out. Names, places, numbers, addresses, etc. By using the about parameter, there may be thousands or millions of returns. Imagine if you put, quote, @real Donald Trump into the search parameter. You could extract all of the following accounts who interacted on Twitter or Facebook, etc. You are only limited by your imagination and the scale of the electronic connectivity. And this is true. They've been storing everything since they could. And when they create an AI that's good enough and data mine what they've been storing already for 10 years, God help us all. As you can see below, on March 9th, 2016, internal auditors noted the FBI was sharing raw FISA information, including but not limited to Section 702 acquired information. In plain English, the raw search results were being shared with unknown entities without any attempt to minimize or redact the results. The person or persons attached to the results were named and obvious. There was no effort to hide their identity or protect their Fourth Amendment rights of privacy, and database access was from the FBI network. But what's the scale here? This is where the story really lies. Read this next excerpt carefully. The operators were searching U.S. persons. The review of November 1, 2015 to May 1, 2016 showed, quote, 85% of those queries were unlawful or non-compliant. 85%, representing a redacted number. We can tell from the space of the redaction the number of searches were between 10,000 and 99,999. If we take the middle number of 50,000, a non-compliant rate of 85% means 42,500 unlawful searches out of 50,000. The six-digit amount, more than 10,000, less than 99,999, and the 85% error rate was captured in a 6-month period, November 2015 to April 2016. Also notice this very important quote. Many of these non-compliant queries involved the use of the same identifiers over different date ranges. This tells us the system users were searching the same phone number, email address, electronic identifier repeatedly over different dates. Additionally, notice the last quote. While the government reports it is unable to provide a reliable estimate of these non-lawful searches, since 2012, there is no apparent reason to believe the November 2015 to April 2016 coincided with an unusually high error rate. That means the 85% unlawful FISA 702.16.17 database abuses has likely been happening since 2012. 2012 is an important date in this database abuse because a network of specific interests is assembled that also shows up in 2016-2017. Who was the 2012 FBI director? Robert Mueller. Who was selected by the FBI group to become special prosecutor in 2017? Who was Mueller's chief of staff? Aaron Zebley, who became one of the lead lawyers on the Mueller special counsel. Who was the 2012 CIA director? John Brennan. Remember the ouster of General Petraeus? Who was ODNI? James Clapper. Remember the NSA is inside the Pentagon Defense Department command structure. Who was the defense secretary? Ash Carter. Who wanted NSA Director Mike Rogers fired in 2016? Brennan, Clapper, Carter. And finally, who wrote and signed off on the January 17 Intelligence Community Assessment and then lied about the use of the Steele dossier? The same John Brennan, James Clapper, and this time, phony Comey. Tens of thousands of searches over 4 years since 2012, and 85% of them are illegal. The results were extracted for? I believe this is all political opposition use, and I'll explain why momentarily. Okay, that's the stunning scale, but who was involved? Private contractors with access to raw FISA information that went well beyond what was necessary to respond to the FBI's requests. All of this is laid out inside this 99-page opinion from Fisk presiding judge Rosemary Collyer, who also noted that none of this FISA abuse was accidental in a footnote on page 87. Note the use of deliberate decision-making. The improper access granted to the blank contractors was apparently in place blank and seems to have been the result of deliberate decision-making. Yikes. This specific footnote, if declassified, could be a key. Note the phrase, redacted access to FBI systems was the subject of an interagency memorandum of understanding entered into redacted. This sentence has the potential to expose an internal decision withheld from Congress and the FISA court by the Obama administration that outlines a process for access and distribution of surveillance data. Note, no notice of this practice was given to the Fisk until 2016. That is important. So in summary, the FISA court identified and quantified tens of thousands of search queries of the NSA FBI database using FISA's 702.1617 system. The database was repeatedly used by persons with contractor access who unlawfully searched and extracted raw results without redacting the information and shared it with an unknown number of entities. The outlined process certainly points toward a political spying and surveillance operation, and we are not the only one to think that's what this system was being used for. Back in 2017, when the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes was working to reauthorize FISA legislation, Nunes wrote a letter to ODNI Dan Coates about this specific issue. Specifically, we have found that the intelligence community's U.S. person unmasking policies are inadequate to prevent abuse, such as political spying. And the world laughed at Devin Nunes, and Devin Nunes stood. To solve the issue, attempt to ensure it never happened again, NSA Director Admiral Mike Rogers eventually took away the About query option permanently in 2017. NSA Director Rogers said the abuse was so inherent there was no way to stop it except to remove the process completely. Additionally, the NSA database operates as a function of the Pentagon, so the Trump administration went one step further. On his last day, the NSA Director Admiral Mike Rogers, together with ODNI Dan Coates, put U.S. Cyber Command, the database steward, fully into the U.S. military as a full combatant command. Unfortunately, it didn't work as shown by the 2018 Fisk opinion rendered by Fisk Judge James Boasberg. There is little doubt the FISA 702.1617 database system was used by Obama-era officials from 2012 through April 2016 as a way to spy on their political opposition. Quite simply, there is no other intellectually honest explanation for the scale and volume of the database abuse that was taking place. And keep in mind, these searches were all ruled to be unlawful. Searches for repeated persons over a period of time that were not authorized. When we reconcile what was taking place and who was involved, then the actions of the exact same principal participants take on a jaw-dropping amount of clarity. All of the action taken by CIA Director Brennan, FBI Director Comey, ODNI Clapper, and Defense Secretary Ash Carter makes sense, including their effort to get NSA Director Michael Rogers fired, which didn't make sense at the time. Everything after March 9th, 2016 had a dual purpose. One, done to cover up the weaponization of FISA, and the IRS/Treasury, and 2, they needed to keep the surveillance ongoing. The beginning decision to use FISA 702 as a domestic surveillance and political spy mechanism appears to have started in or around 2012, perhaps sometime shortly before the 2012 presidential election and before John Brennan left the White House and moved to the CIA. Well, isn't that a coincidence? It would appear the Obama administration learned a lesson from attempting to gather a large opposition research database operation inside a functioning organization large enough to have some good people that might blow the whistle. The timeline reflects a few months after realizing the, quote, secret research project was now worthless, June 2012. They focused more deliberately on a smaller network within the intelligence apparatus and began weaponizing the FBI NSA database. How this all comes together in 2019-2020. Fusion GPS was not hired until April 2016, just to research Donald Trump. As shown in the evidence provided by the FISC, the intelligence community was already doing surveillance and spy operations. The Obama administration already knew everything about the Trump campaign and were monitoring everything by exploiting the FISA database. However, after the NSA alerts in around March 9, 2016, and particularly after April 18 shutdown of contractor access, the Obama intelligence community needed Fusion GPS to create a legal, albeit ex post facto, justification for the pre-existing surveillance and spy operations. Fusion GPS gave them that justification in the Steele Dossier. That's why the FBI small group, which later transitioned into the Mueller team, were so strongly committed to and defending the formation of the Steele Dossier and its dubious content. The Steele Dossier, an outcome of the Fusion contract, contains 3 insurance policy purposes. 1, the cover story and justification for the pre-existing surveillance operation. 2, facilitate the FBI counterintelligence operation against the Trump campaign. 3, to continue the operation with a special counsel and to protect both. An insurance policy would be needed. The Steele Dossier becomes the investigative virus the FBI wanted inside the system. To get the virus into official status, they used the FISA application as the delivery method and injected it into Carter Page. The FBI already knew Carter Page. Essentially, Carter Page was irrelevant. What they needed was the FISA warrant and the dossier in the system. The Obama intelligence community needed Fusion GPS to give them a plausible justification for already existing surveillance and spy operations. Dr. Dave Janis talks about this, the parallel construction, the hammer. Basically, so the intelligence community is using methods and sources that are illegal to gain out information about you. They get that information, but they can't present it to a court because they gained that information illegally. So they have to parallel construct something beside that information, a new story on how they got to that information, and then present that information to the court and the judge, as if you were legally surveilled. It's parallel construction. Police do it all the time. Anyways, ultimately, that's why the Steele Dossier was so important. Without it, the FBI would not have a tool that Mueller needed to continue the investigation of President Trump. In essence, by renewing the FISA application, despite them knowing the underlying dossier was junk, the FBI was keeping the surveillance gateway open for Team Mueller to exploit later on. Additionally, without the Steele Dossier, the DOJ and FBI are naked with their FISA 702 abuse as outlined by John Ratcliffe. John Ratcliffe, who is getting ready to be the new ODNI. Anyways, thankfully, we know U.S. Attorney John Durham has talked to NSA Director Mike Rogers. In this video, Rogers explains how he was notified of what was happening and what he did after the notification. And we've already gone over that. I have it in previous videos. Just in case you're not convinced that the IRS was political espionage 1.0, you know, the heroes are always on it. Judicial Watch, one of the heroes in the world. I don't know how many there are. There's probably less than 10. New IRS documents show Lerner did not need conservative group donor lists. Emails mention, quote, secret research project by top IRS official. Let's read through this Judicial Watch article in the context of their fight against the FBI and the DOJ to get the Clinton emails released, to get the FISA transcripts released. Just see how the government has responded to rational, reasonable explanations asked for by Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch today released a new batch of Internal Revenue Service email documents revealing that under former IRS official Lois Lerner, the agency seems to acknowledge having needlessly solicited donor lists from nonprofit political groups. According to a May 21, 2012 memo from the IRS Deputy Associate Chief Counsel, such information was not needed across the board and not used in making the agency's determination on exempt status. Later in her May 10, 2013 remarks, in which Lerner first revealed in response to a question she had planted about the IRS targeting of conservative groups, she conceded that the requests for donor names was not appropriate, not usual. The new documents obtained by Judicial Watch also reveal that 75% of the groups from whom the lists were solicited were apparently conservative, with only 5% being liberal. Contained in the newly released IRS documents is an email from Deputy Associate Chief Counsel Margot L. Stevens that was sent in response to a question from Lerner concerning attempts to return donor lists the IRS had controversially obtained. In Stevens' May 21, 2012 email to Lerner, she wrote, "Lois, I wanted to get back with you with respect to your question whether TEGE could return to those organizations from whom donor names were solicited in questionnaires following their submission of applications for recognition of their tax-exempt status. Now that TEG has reviewed those files and determined that such information was not needed across the board and not used in making the agency's determination on exempt status, a subsequent IRS email thread on June 27, 2012 revealed that the inappropriately obtained donor lists were being used for a, quote, secret research project, and that a top official wanted then acting IRS Commissioner Steve Miller to decide how to handle the issue. The email exchange with the subject line donor names included the following: David L. Fish, IRS Acting Director of Exempt Organizations Rulings and Agreements, to Holly Paz. Joseph Urban had actually started a secret research project on whether we could, consistent with 6104, argue that redacted. Joe was quite agitated yesterday when I told him what we were doing. He was involved when the initial question was raised, but we didn't continue reading him in. At one point, he started saying that this was a decision for Steve Miller. I told him we were already doing it, and that I didn't know whether Lois had already talked to Nicole, former IRS Chief of Staff to IRS Commissioner Steve Miller, about this. Would not be surprised if he already started working on Lois. Lerner's and other IRS officials' concerns about how to handle these donor lists came on the heels of an advisory from the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration to her and other IRS officials in late March 2012 of, quote, an audit we plan to conduct of the IRS's process for reviewing applications for tax exemption by potential Section 501c4, 501c5, and 501c6 organizations. The documents produced do not detail the secret research project nor disclose how the IRS used the donor names the agency improperly obtained. Then IRS Commissioner Miller initially testified to Congress on May 17, 2013 that instructions had been given to destroy any donor lists. But donor lists were actually produced to the House Ways and Means Committee 4 months later. The House Ways and Means Committee also announced at May 7, 2014 hearing that after scores of conservative groups provided donor information to the IRS, nearly 1 in 10 donors were subject to an audit. In 2011, as many as 5 donors to one conservative 501c4 organization were audited, according to the Wall Street Journal. And this past June, the IRS admitted wrongdoing in releasing the Conservative National Organization for Marriage's confidential tax record and donor list, which were published March 2012 by the Human Rights Campaign. The Human Rights Campaign is the chief political rival to NAM. Its outgoing president had been named a national co-chair of the Obama re-election campaign. The IRS reportedly agreed to pay NAM $50,000 to settle the lawsuit. The documents obtained by Judicial Watch also include a July 18, 2012 email to Lerner from Judith Kindle, Senior Technical Advisor to Lois Lerner, showing that 75% of the nearly 200 non-profit 501c4 political activist groups targeted by the IRS were conservative, and only 5% were liberal. That 5% you would put like the real progressives in there, like Jimmy Dore. Of the 199 C4 cases, approximately 3/4 appear to be conservative-leaning, while fewer than 10 appear to be liberal or progressive-leaning groups based solely on the name. The remainder do not obviously lean to either side of the political spectrum. Shortly after this email exchange, another email chain on June 28th between Lerner and Holly Paz, the former director of the Office of Rulings and Agreements, shows that Lerner believed that the TIGTA and congressional inquiries into the IRS's practices were dangerous. June 28, 2012, Paz to Lerner. Now TIGTA wants to talk to me. I am guessing they read this morning's paper. We'll keep you posted. June 28, 2012, Lerner to Paz. Not alone. Wait till I am there. Paz to Lerner. Sorry, too late. He already called me. It was not about the Wall Street Journal. Just him trying to get a better understanding of the scope of the House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Dave Camp's request. Lerner to Paz. Just as dangerous. I'll talk to you soon. Be there in a half hour. The dangerous Camp request, to which Paz and Lerner referred, was apparently a reference to a letter sent in May by Republican Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, David Camp, to IRS Commissioner Douglas Shulman, requesting copies of all 501c4 applications from 2010 and 2011. Despite the consternation expressed about the dangerous Camp applications request, an August 14, 2012 email from Lerner to Paz revealed that as of that date, no one from the Hill has shown up to look at them. The new documents also include emails further contradicting President Obama's February 2014 excuse that the IRS targeting was entirely the fault of bonehead decisions in local offices. Obama was parroting Lois Lerner's May 2013 claim that the targeting of conservative groups was the fault of low-level employees in Cincinnati. In the months leading up to the 2012 presidential election, Lerner and other top IRS officials made it clear that no advocacy applications should be approved or denied without express approval from Lerner's office in Washington, D.C. June 20th, 2012, email from IRS attorney Michael C. Seton to managers in Exempt Organizations Division defining targeted groups' approval procedures. Please inform the reviewers and staff in your groups that before issuing any favorable or initial denial rulings on any cases with advocacy issues, the reviewers must notify me and you, Lerner, and other senior IRS staffers via email and get our approval. No favorable or initial denial rulings can be issued without your or my approval. I may require a short briefing depending on the facts and the circumstances of the particular case. June 26, 2012, email from Lerner to Holly Paz and Cindy Thomas, in which Lerner notes that TIGTA asked for files directly from the Federal Records Center and warns that this makes sense in context of a really sensitive investigation alleging political bias by the IRS. The Federal Records Act requires the preservation of official emails at the National Archives Federal Records Center. This email from Lerner was dated during the same time period during which the IRS claims her emails were lost and her BlackBerry was wiped clean and removed as scrap for disposal in violation of Section 3106 of the FRA. The IRS failed to notify the archives that Lerner's emails were missing. The IRS also produced an email exchange in which Lerner takes issue with IRS spokesman Dean Patterson, who had revealed March 8, 2012 roll call article the existence of a companion process for administering applications for tax-exempt status. After Lerner received an advisory from TIGTA asking to discuss the roll call article, the following email exchange occurred. Lerner to Patterson. Importance high. As you can see below, email from TIGTA Audit Manager Thomas Siddell. We are meeting with TIGTA later this week. They have given us a list of topics they want to discuss. I am not familiar with the roll call article he cites. Can you shoot us a copy, please? Thanks. Anthony to Lerner. Lois, per your request, here's the roll call article. I put Dean's quote in bold. It's about 17 graphs into the story. Dean Patterson, a spokesman for the IRS, denied the existence of a special committee, but said the IRS has a companion process that administers the same provisions of the tax law in the context of new applications for tax-exempt status. The legal issues and the information that will inform our discussions will be similar in both contexts. Lerner to Anthony. Thanks. Sorry, but I really have no clue what he means by a companion process that administers the same provisions of the tax law in the context of new applications for tax-exempt status. The legal issues and the information that will inform our discussions will be similar in both contexts. As I will need to talk to TIGTA about this on Thursday, perhaps you can give me a better sense of what he's referring to? I could guess, but I don't want to be guessing in this context. On October 9, 2013, Judicial Watch filed a FOIA lawsuit against the IRS asking the District Court for the District of Columbia to compel agency to produce records of all communications relating to the review process for organizations seeking 501c4 nonprofit status since January 1, 2010. The lawsuit also asked the court to order the IRS to provide records of communications by former IRS official Lois Lerner concerning the controversial review and approval process. The IRS failed to respond to the 4 FOIA requests at issues in this lawsuit dating back to May 2013. The communications sought by Judicial Watch covered portions of the same period for which IRS on June 13, 2014 notified the Senate Finance Committee that Lerner's emails had been lost or destroyed, but did not notify the court or Judicial Watch about these missing emails. In response to our request for more information, U.S. District Court Judge Emmett Sullivan, well, I'll be damned, held a July 10 hearing and ordered the IRS to produce sworn declarations about its efforts to find and restore Lerner's allegedly missing emails. Isn't it damn annoying that all these same judges keep popping up? It's always the same intelligence names, the same judge names, the same names. Brr. And then, on August 25th, Department of Justice attorneys for the IRS conceded to Judicial Watch that Lerner's, quote, missing emails and all government records had been backed in case of a catastrophe, but that it would be too onerous to search these backup systems for Lerner's emails. The Justice Department has since put out anonymous statements alleging Judicial Watch misheard what its lawyers said and that the agency did not disclose new information about a backup system. It is not in dispute that the existence of any backup system was withheld from the court despite 2 orders demanding specifically sworn declarations about where Lerner's emails may be residing and an effort to obtain them. The Obama administration has refused Judicial Watch's request to amend the sworn declarations and finally informed Judge Sullivan directly about this backup system. Administration lawyers have steadfastly refused and subsequently submitted a status report to the court on August 29 that, again, makes no mention of any backup system. Judicial Watch lawyers are preparing now to ask the court for relief in light of the Obama administration's continuing obstruction and contempt for Judge Sullivan's orders. Oh, trust me, they don't have any contempt for Judge Sullivan. Again, Judicial Watch has uncovered more shocking emails from the IRS forced out by a lawsuit and a federal court, said Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton. Now we learn that stunning news that Obama's IRS had a secret research program using illicitly obtained confidential donor lists of conservative and Tea Party organizations that oppose President Obama's agenda or re-election. With all this IRS abuse, it is no wonder Lois Lerner said that questions by Congress and others were dangerous, and it is well past time that President Obama should be held accountable about his repeated and recent falsehoods about his IRS scandal. Next up, Judicial Watch will ask Judge Sullivan for help in requiring the Obama IRS to stop its obstruction and disclose the no longer missing emails of Lois Lerner and other IRS officials. This article was written September 4th, 2014. So Judge Emmett Sullivan, who is currently in his own shitstorm, was involved in this shitstorm. And what we're finding out over and over and over again is that the prosecutors and the judges are on the same team. At first glance, that might seem correct to you, but it's not. The judge is supposed to be impartial, supposed to hear both sides. But Judge Emmett Sullivan, back in September of 2014, was involved in slow walking and obstructing Judicial Watch's discovery of the IRS scandal, which we have now called political spying 1.0. Judge Emmett Sullivan was in charge of blocking access to that information. And now in 2020, he's hiring a DC attorney to defend his actions in the Flynn case. Judge Emmett G. Sullivan, the federal judge who refused a Justice Department request to immediately drop the prosecution of former Trump advisor Michael Flynn, has hired a high-profile trial lawyer to argue his reasons for investigating whether dismissing the case is legally or ethically appropriate. A rare step that adds to this criminal case's already unusual path, U.S. District Judge Emmett G. Sullivan has retained Beth Wilkinson to represent him in defending his decision to a federal appeals court in Washington, according to a person familiar with the hire who spoke on the condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the matter. The U.S. District Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit is now examining the judge's actions and the larger case against Flynn after lawyers for President Trump's former national security advisor asked the court to force Sullivan to toss Flynn's guilty plea. That's right. Judge Sullivan was doing the same old slow walk, defend, obfuscate that he's been doing for the better part of 10 years that I know of. Sidney Powell went on TV and just outed it all. And then she went right head on into him. And when he started his blocking and his obfuscation, she filed a writ of mandamus with the judge above him, basically saying he has to do his job. The prosecutors have said throw the case. The defense has said throw the case. Make the judge throw the case. And so now the judge, still insisting that he's not going to comply, has hired a lawyer to go in there and fight that writ of mandamus, which is just trying to get him to do his damn job. Wilkinson, known for her top-notch legal skills and get-results style, is expected to file a notice with the court in the coming week about representing the judge. She declined to comment when reached Friday evening. Sullivan also declined to comment through his office. But altogether, I was really confused about the number of unmasking requests that was done on 14 December 2016. I subsequently found out that they were all in the Treasury Department. Then we found out the Treasury Department was used to block the investigation into the IRS scandal. The IRS scandal was political espionage 1.0. So when they later switched to political espionage 2.0, which was illegal surveillance through the NSA database, they got caught. So they switched to political espionage 3.0, which was the Steele Dossier and the supposed legal access to the NSA database. It makes sense that Treasury was doing all these unmaskings because all of these people at Treasury were really just Obama administration officials protecting illegal political espionage. Wow. There's a lot more to uncover in here. We're going to make more videos on it. I'm sorry if this one isn't as linear as it needs to be, but this is intentionally a non-linear situation, and we're gonna have to kind of put it together because they've obfuscated it on purpose. We're gonna make more videos on this. In the meantime, I also wanted to mention I made a video many months ago about Ken Cuccinelli and I guess what Q calls the Scaramucci model. And I just wanted to point out that back when I made that video, I said that regardless of all the things that looked like it was against John Ratcliffe in his nomination process, including the fact that he had been initially denied and had to back away from the nomination process, I said that at the time, I think he's actually going to become the ODNI. Well, it looks like John Ratcliffe is going to become the ODNI. Sorry, you picking up what I'm putting down? I think it's pretty obvious why they don't want Ratcliffe as DNI. And I don't know why I'm saying this, but I think he's gonna become DNI. I mean, with literally everything laid against them. The same hard-charging Senate that has confirmed tons of judges for Mr. Trump seems to not be able to get a Senate confirmation for even the most basic positions. When it comes to DNI, the reason why is because, and I didn't mean to rhyme just then, but many from both sides of the aisle in Washington are terrified that somebody like Ratcliffe would be put in that position, because they've already got the goods on these guys. Trump needs his his squad, his car. He needs a group of close-knit guys like Untouchables that will be willing to do justice, which is different than the law. Like, obviously the law has failed us, and that's clear, but justice still exists in this world. So he announces Ratcliffe. Senators from both sides of the aisle freak out, and then the white hats take note, write everybody's name down, and then Trump withdraws his name, and Ratcliffe writes a little love letter on Twitter to Trump saying how he would do him great, but he understands and he wants to step back. Then Trump renominates him, and they can't help but to fall for it again. And I said earlier, I don't know if he's going to actually get the position, but even if they are just running this same grift twice on the deep state, it's hilarious. John Ratcliffe is going to be an amazing appointment. And what's funny is they used the Scaramucci, Cuccinelli model, whatever you want to call it, again. Because he's got the acting director of national intelligence, Grinnell, about to be replaced. And right before he gets replaced, he's just declassed. Boom, 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 boom. Taking all the shots. Boom, 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 boom. And then deuces. He steps back, and the official ODNI steps in. Didn't do any declassing. Didn't take any political hits. Didn't make anybody angry. It was all done by the appointee. I don't know how the other side doesn't see this stuff, because they do it over and over again to them. But regardless. In the meantime, like, share, sub. Peace.